Welcome back. Welcome back. Context matters. Today, context matters in the space of a job search, recruitment, and I think it's an interesting conversation because I definitely like when I was sitting in the recruiter seat, I can kind of see the other side of the table, but I've also been in a candidate experience. So, and I think it's super relevant right now because a lot of people are like, why am I being ghosted in my job search? So let's talk about
Yeah,
that because I think yeah, I think I can bring some insights, and you have a lot of experience in that space as well. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think I can speak on it from like a person who is looking for a job. I I have a love hate. I think I said this before as well. I have a love hate relationship with LinkedIn because I feel like LinkedIn is great when it comes to online networking in the sense that you come across some really interesting profiles if they are authentic and they haven't been, you know, beaten to death with AI fixes. So I do have met some very interesting people, connected with some really interesting people through LinkedIn. But I have to say that I have never, ever, ever secured a full time position through LinkedIn. And the thing that, you end up like starting to kind of like wonder is you start to feel like, well, is my profile not good enough? Or do I need to make it better? And then you go down this like rabbit hole where you just keep on trying to make it better and better and better. And now that we have AI as well, it's so easy to take your profile and put it on there, whether you're using ChatGPT or you're using Claude or whatever it is that you use, and be like, okay, review it, do an audit, and tell me how what you think about it. Depending on how you've personalized your AI, whatever tool it is that you use, I mean, it can also not be the most constructive thing because I find that it tears it apart for that sake of keep on fixing it. And then you just, like I said, keep on going to this rabbit hole. So I found that part of it very, very, very frustrating. And then another thing is that, you keep on applying for these positions because, you set your settings to a way that every time there's a job post based on what it is your specialty is and what you're looking for, you keep on getting these like, job postings and you apply but you just don't hear anything back. There's been very, very finite number of times where I've actually gotten replies, and it's usually automated ones saying, "Oh, you're not the right candidate," and they don't really give you any other reason. And it's like, well, tell me. Tell me why I'm not the right candidate. Tell me what it is that you were looking for that maybe I missed the opportunity for based on my skills or lack thereof. So I find that's one thing when it comes to the job search component of it when it comes to going through LinkedIn. And then the other one is like when you actually do have interviews and you do get them organically, usually through your network. And again, like, you'll just get ghosted. And I mean, I understand that recruiters and headhunters are busy, but all it takes is just a couple of minutes to be like, hey, you didn't work out for A, B, C, D reasons. Would the constructive criticism on why you didn't work out as a candidate for a specific role, I think would help somebody like myself, or I'm sure other people, to be like, okay, well, that's fair, that's valid. All right, I will take note of that and work at it better the next time. Those are the two things I would say that I find incredibly frustrating currently in the recruitment or a job seeking marketplace.
Yeah, well, let me let you in a little recruiter secret. Well, it's not really a secret. Listen, we all, first of all, collectively as recruiters, like I've done recruitment for a number of years, we all collectively understand the system is completely broken, the process is broken. Here's the thing. Another thing, like again, I'll play like devil's advocate, and then we'll talk about the other side as well. But from a devil's advocate, like recruiters, a lot of times their hands are tied. It's depending on whether they're an external recruiter and internal also matters. But a lot of times the hands are tied in terms of giving actual feedback because they're so afraid to give real feedback because they're afraid to be like, say something that will then put them in a situation to be sued or whatever, right? So that's a big thing, which is why they do the standard stuff. The other thing is that on the flip side, again, little insight, the reality is that there's a lot of candidates that get selected for reasons that companies actually should be sued for. So anyway, like, that's just the reality. Like, it's like, oh, well, I actually know this person and I just kind of like them better than the other candidate, although the other candidate might actually have more experience on paper, but because I don't know them, right? And we hire people we like, we trust, we know. But you can't say that because that's discriminatory, right? That's not fair. That's not objective. But that's the reality that a lot of recruiters, they won't ever say that, right? But that's what the reality with a lot of recruiters, what they deal with. and it's wrong. It's not, I'm not saying it's right. And again, if it's an external recruiter, they might be a little bit more flexible in terms of what they can say and like give you feedback and coach you because they're different. But an internal recruiter, especially if it's like a junior sourcing person, all they're going to do is hit that little ATS system, the applicant tracking system button that says just disqualify all these candidates because we already found somebody or whatever. So, it's just, and there's a lot we can dive into that, but that's the reality, which is why, like, I always go back to the networking piece, right? And even that is hard. I mean, full transparency. I do job search, like I do job search.
Mm.
I've been doing this for a long time, and I can tell you that there's also this element of luck in job search, right? And I'm
Yeah, for sure.
convinced in some capacity that right now it's easier to start your own business to find a job.
I mean, that's why I started doing the whole freelance thing, right? Q2 2024, I told you I left a really, really good corporate job, not because I wasn't good at it, not because it wasn't a good opportunity. It's just that physically I couldn't manage the commute back and forth to Abu Dhabi. It was a tough decision because at the end of the day, you should never leave a well-paying job. But I had to think about my physical and mental health, that the toll of that drive was taking on me. I tried my hardest from April to June to basically try and find a corporate job. And again, either through the network that I have or through LinkedIn, through Indeed, through all of these portals that you have that you basically create this profile on, you put a lot of effort. You have to put in a lot of effort to upload your CV, but then fill out everything that they need and make sure that it's
Yeah.
attractive. And then, like I told you, AI is a blessing, but it can also be a curse in a way because it's round and round we go and it's always like, oh, you can make it better or you can tweak this or you can do that. So it's never ending, right? It's almost like being on a dating app, but for like finding a job. And then you do all of that, but you still have to keep on going at it. There's like vacancies and you keep on applying. And but then after 2 months, I was like, Is it me? Is there some how is it? Like I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I have all of this experience. What's wrong? What's wrong with me? And then also, you might have savings, but at some point the tap runs dry. So I was like, fine, I'll just, start doing freelance. And I was very lucky that I ended up getting a couple of projects here and there and sustaining myself. And that's what I've been doing for most of like 2025. And then, the thing is though, it does at some point, if you're just doing it by yourself, you have to like work on a project and then to simultaneously try and make sure that once this project is done, you can get yourself another one. But it doesn't mean that it's always going to be, oh, I'm done with this and immediately I fall into another one, right? It's going to take a little
Uh,
bit of time. Sometimes it might take 1 to 3 months to get into another like project basis, right? Especially if you're doing project to project, regardless of whatever nature or sector that you're working in. So yeah, there is an advantage to that because you push yourself into the entrepreneurial realm, but then comes the fact that there isn't always a solid paycheck at the end of the month. There isn't the solid benefits that comes with working in a corporate setting, right? There isn't that security. And I don't think anybody, I think in the current, I could be wrong, this is more your bread and butter, but I think in the current workforce globally, that sense of security is not so secure when it comes to everyone across different sectors. And even if you've been somewhere for a very, very, very long period of times, there could be changes that just get implemented and you have to roll with the punches and you're either lucky you get to stay or the time is up, ticker's up, you got to go. So I think it's a very, very strange time. I can only speak of my experiences here in the UAE and predominantly in Dubai, which is very much a network orientated referral based kind of system based on my experience, even though everybody says, oh, apply online and we have a system, so on and so forth. But I do still feel after lots of conversations, bless you, that
Thank you.
your network is your net worth. But yeah, I find it very, very challenging to be able to secure a good job. And then there's so many isms that come into it. And I think me being on this side of the hill where I'm turning 45 and I'm on the middle part of my career, more towards the later part of my career, where that ageism also I find is starting to creep in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everything you're saying is valid, and it's not you, honestly. Like, I mean, this is obviously you're my friend, but also it's an objective opinion. I would have told you if there's something you could do differently, right? As your friend, but
I'm sure. I
yeah,
hope so.
yeah, but yeah, I would hope so too. Otherwise, why we're friends? But yeah, so I think there's a lot of people that find themselves in similar situations, and I think to your point, it's A couple of things. Number one, AI makes it worse because, and this is again from a recruiter lens, we get a lot more candidates. So because it's so much easier to now apply a role that before would get like, I don't know if I'm making up numbers, like 100 candidates, because it's so easy to use a tool such as AI or other platform where you upload your resume, you apply to mass jobs at the same time. So if everybody's doing that, right, it becomes very oversaturated. So as recruiters,
Yeah,
what we use obviously ATS systems, but it makes it that much harder to skim because the reality is we won't even look at every single resume. It's feasible and possible for, especially for a lot of specific, like for really kind of like what's the word for roles that have a lot of applicants, right? Like there's specific roles that are very unique and you're not going to have as many applicants. But let me stop actually right there, because there are also a lot of people that apply for jobs they have no business applying to. So that's another thing.
true.
So it's and you're like, why? Like, and you look on LinkedIn, and sometimes I'll look at like, ATS systems like before, and I'm like, how did we get this many people for this very specific role? And as you start to skim through, you start to realize people just don't read job descriptions. So that's another thing, right? Like, so this is again from a
Yeah,
recruiter perspective, which is why, like, as recruiters, what we usually do is we do source through LinkedIn. We do, right? Obviously, again, it's like a pool of so many candidates, but LinkedIn is one space we look at. We also, first thing we do is we ask around on our network. We either go
yeah,
back to candidates we spoke with before, or we go around our recruiter friends network and say, hey guys, like we're looking for X, Y, and Z, right? And then if that doesn't work, then we actually go to the ATS system. So that's usually, in a lot of cases, that's the process. Obviously, this all varies from company to company. How many recruiters? Do you have sourcers? Do you have single recruiters? Like it depends on so many factors. Generally speaking, recruiters also obviously get bonuses and so on for getting the right talent. So they're gonna go the route that's gonna get them that result best,
yeah.
right? To fit the right person. AI makes it worse because everybody is applying without even reading job descriptions, or AI will read it. It's not always accurate. And then it just sends your resume. So anyway, so that's the LinkedIn point I want to mention is that LinkedIn, in my opinion, is good for two things and two things only: create content and put it out there, or consume content. And then the second one is build your personal brand. I think the days of LinkedIn being a job search engine are probably gone, because as much as,
Mm,
at least from a candidate perspective, I think as recruiters, we still use it because it's easy to find, because we can like use the LinkedIn recruiter and search for people.
yeah.
But as a candidate applying, I think as a candidate, it's good for putting your personal brand out there and so on, and maybe like, connecting with people, but it's not a job search tool, in my opinion, anymore.
Yeah, I think because I've been going really hard at this LinkedIn and let's say Indeed for the majority of the last 2 years. And that's what I have noticed where, you know, writing little things and posting, it's almost like a social media, but in a corporate sense. And I also have to say that I really dislike it when people bring like personal content into the LinkedIn space because it's like this is purely a professional realm. There are other channels. Go to Facebook, go to Instagram, go to TikTok, go to Snapchat, do all of that over there. Leave LinkedIn for what it is. It's a professional setting. We don't need to get personal. We don't need to get political. Just leave it for what it is, which I find a
Yeah.
little bit frustrating. But I have noticed that. And another thing is also that there's this, and I guess I'd like to ask your expertise, when it comes to your LinkedIn brand building, how close does it need to be to your resume? Because sometimes that's also a challenge where some people will say, no, your LinkedIn and your resume or CV, however you want to call it, depending on, British or American terms. How similar does it have to be? Or does it have to be that your CV is your CV and then your LinkedIn has elements of your CV, but it doesn't need to be an exact copy and paste or vice versa?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's mixed opinions of this. My opinion on this, being in this space, is a couple of things. So first of all, your LinkedIn is like, again, it's your personal brand. So it can be a little bit more, it can be a little bit more, what's how to say, exciting, right? Like your resume is basically just saying, here's what I've done here and so on. Should your jobs kind of, at least in like the jobs that you listed and what you've done, should those match? Yes. The difference in LinkedIn is that LinkedIn is a little bit more juicy because you can then add recommendations from other people, which, in my opinion, are more valuable than a reference you will give, because a reference you will
Yeah.
give will never say anything bad about you, versus a recommendation on your profile, meaning somebody's putting their public face out there, their profile, their reputation to vouch for you publicly, which matters more, right? So, but in that description, do you want to highlight some other things? Yes, it doesn't, as long as it's not a completely different thing. And I'll give you an example. Like if you're, let's say, you like the way it becomes confusing is for career change seekers. So career change seekers will
Yeah.
have like a resume that's very standard for, like, let's say, I don't know, a marketing job, right? But then they want
Yeah.
to change their career to something else. So their LinkedIn reflects this whole other new persona of side projects they've been doing, and photography, for example. That becomes confusing, and it shouldn't be that big of a difference. But as long as
No,
you're
I get it.
the as long as what is the like the jobs that you had, the chronological
Yeah,
order of your jobs is
the
there.
chronology of your job
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. Like that's it. The rest, if you want to make it a little bit more personalized, you can. That's what LinkedIn, it's your brand, it's who you are, right? So you can add more things to it. Like on my LinkedIn, for example, I have the different multiple hats that I wear. I have my portfolio,
Yeah.
I have the work that I do, because it makes like that's my whole thing, right? And I want to show my whole self. Final note, with that being said, you also have to keep in mind your audience, because sometimes
Yeah.
a recruiter will look at a profile like mine, for example, they say, my God, this girl is doing so many things. I don't know where to place her. So
Yeah.
not everybody's gonna appreciate the beauty of your profile, let's say. So you have to keep in mind your audience. Who's gonna be reading, and is it gonna hit with that audience? Like, are they gonna understand it? Or are they gonna be like,
Mm.
nah, this is not the right fit? So obviously audience matters depending on who's looking at your profile and what kind of job you want to get. But I think otherwise there's no right answer, honestly, as long as chronological order, as long as it's not like so overwhelmingly different to where people question the authenticity of who you are. I think the
Of
rest is
course.
fair game.
Of course. And I think also that also goes to when it comes to the chronology of things. I think sometimes people tend to maybe fib a little bit when it comes to certain aspects of their work experience because they'll think it's a bad thing to have a gap, right? But I mean, life happens, life happens in this. For example, when I started doing consulting, I started on a really, really amazing project and then life happened. And unfortunately, because of those personal circumstances, I had to really pause, deal with what was going on, and then got back into the swing of things a little bit later down the line. That didn't mean that I wasn't trying to build on that freelance experience. It's just that, I maybe didn't have a full blown project at that point in time, but I was trying to network and trying to get the whole, hey, I'm a freelancer, look at me, pay attention to me, or like, hey, give me a chance. So I feel that sometimes, even when I've looked, because most of my experience has been from the seeker side, but when I have been in operational roles where I'm head of ops or I'm in a managerial role and I'm responsible for recruiting, resumes look great or CVs look great. I want to see that person in front of me, right? Okay, online or whatever. But I'm an old school person. I like to have that face to face conversation with somebody because I think you can read a lot of a person by having them right in front of you and seeing the way that they interact with you, how they show up for that interview, what makes them tick, what they pay attention to, the way in which they speak. And sometimes I feel like I've gone to interviews and they've asked me questions and I'm just like, wow, that's a really dumb question that you just asked me. But obviously I'm the one applying for the job, so I can't say it, obviously say that to them. But I'm just like, I wish you'd been a little bit more creative. Like, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? I find that is like the dumbest question you can ask somebody because they're obviously not going to be completely transparent with you because they want the job. So I feel like when it comes to the interview process, people need to get a little bit more creative in that sense as well, right? So, and also prepping is very, very important. I interviewed for a position once and I really appreciated the HR because she made sure she told me what it is that I would be expected to discuss. And I was asked to go and study what I would be applying for. And I thought that was great because not only did it help me prep for the interview, okay, the job didn't materialize for whatever reason, but I got to know so much about the company and also the fact that the articles that they had published based on their business that it added to my knowledge base. So did I get the job? No, but did I get a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom based on prepping for that role and that interview? Yes. So, I think that's really, really important. I feel like sometimes, and with all my respect to recruiters, because these systems are in place that have made their lives easier, because obviously they might get 1,000 candidates applying for the same role. So they might get a little bit, I don't want to use the word lazy, but something along those lines, where they might overlook really, really good candidates because they have just, they're like, oh, I have a system and the system will take care of it. You know what I mean?
Listen, I not only know what you mean, it is a pet peeve of mine with some of these recruiters. So, one thing people have to realize is that recruiters, you can recognize a good recruiter versus a recruiter who's just there ticking up the box, they got the job. And just to be fair, listen, I have a lot of great recruiter friends that are excellent at what they do. And I've also come across recruiters who are just there for a paycheck. Recruiting is very easy to get into. As long as you can speak, people will give you a shot, essentially, right?
Yeah.
It's not a high paying job in the beginning. The only recruiters that make money are the good ones. A lot of times it's like an entry sales role, essentially. So you
Yeah.
have to understand that you're dealing with people who don't always know how to have a conversation, who don't always know how to ask the right questions. And if they're like a sorcerer, then usually most sorcerers are really just checking off the boxes. So the minute you hear somebody asking you a question, like just a crappy question about strengths, you know exactly the level of this person's qualities as a recruiter. In that case, you then say, okay, I really need to dumb it down for this person. So they just pass me on to the next round, right? And this is where
Yeah.
you just give them exactly what they need to hear. Let them tick the boxes that they're ticking on the back end on the other side of that phone call, just so they get you to the person that you might actually have a conversation with. If a recruiter comes on on a call and actually has a conversation like a normal person talking to, like a two-way conversation, then you know you're talking to somebody. And this is where you can actually make it a conversation versus just answering questions. Because if you start asking questions back, which I always recommend to do, like turn it into a conversation, not a one-way street. But a recruiter who is like ticking the boxes, she want to be able, or he or she want to be able to have a conversation. Also, a lot of times they don't have enough knowledge about the role or the company or the team to even be able to have that conversation. So you can't even really ask them questions because then it's just going to throw them off. So with those kind of people, keep it as simple as possible, essentially. Anyway, and you can spot these people, right? Just give them what they want. The point of a resume and the first screen call is to get to the person who's actually going to be doing the hiring. And so you want to give them exactly what they want to hear. So they check their boxes and say, yep, that's a good candidate. She's real. That's the real resume. We're going to pass her along. She ticks all the boxes. Right. This is where, and that's just the reality of it. And it sucks because it's not fair. It's unfortunate, but that's just it. And we understand this in the recruitment world, right? And the other thing is that a lot of recruiters, yeah, like, I mean, just like any other job, fortunately, many people are in jobs just to get a paycheck. And I get it. I'm a little bit sympathetic to that. I get it. Life is tough. You need a paycheck. But I also want to argue that if you're going to be in a job and you're getting a paycheck, you might as well just be decent at it. That's just be
Mm.
decent for your own sake. You know what I mean? So when people like get on a call and now they're also potentially ruining chances of somebody else getting a job because they're a shitty recruiter on that side. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a huge pet peeve of mine because you're in a job to help other people find jobs. That's their job, is to find people to match them with the right opportunities. Right. And if you can't do that, you should not be a recruiter. You know what I mean? So it pisses me off, honestly. I'm not a fan of those recruiters and I think they shouldn't be hired, but
So I have a question for you. How do you feel
or
about
rant over.
nepotism? How do you feel about nepotism? It usually happens, I mean, I think it happens in large scale and small scale companies, but I think more so the ones that are a mom and pop shop or like something that is grown organically. But how do you feel? What are your thoughts on nepotism when it comes to the workforce? Not necessarily you yourself, but let's say you work for an entity and you see that most of the people who are within that entity are either family or friends of the people who founded it. And therefore, because that is the culture, it kind of affects the entire culture of the company, not just from a head office perspective, but in the way in which decisions are made, the way in which operations are run, processes are handled, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so listen, and that's where yeah, like candidates have to make a decision of because you're not going to go in and change the culture. It's going to be what it is. They're going to make decisions how they make decisions. There's a specific family structure and so on. This is where you have to either accept it and play that game and be okay with it, or don't accept it. I'll give you an example. One of my
Sure.
best friends had she was, a recruiter reached out to her for a COO role. She's a mom, she's a stay-at-home mom right now, trying to get back into the workforce. And then, so anyway, so the recruiter was trying to set up a call between her and the founder. And it's like a really fast growing startup and so on. And so the founder told the recruiter at 9 a.m., I think it was Monday, yeah, on Monday at 9 a.m., he said, I want to speak with this person, with my friend, with the candidate at 10:30 a.m. And of course, my friend's like, I'm not ready for this is a COO role. I'm not ready for that conversation. And
Yeah.
I need to take care of kids. I had other plans. I cannot make this happen in an hour and a half. And the founder's feedback was, that's not the kind of COO I'm looking for. I'm looking for a COO that's going to drop everything and be available. So that tells you a lot about the mindset of
The
that
corporate
person,
culture.
right? Do you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's about
Yeah,
the
of
culture, and
course.
that's all you need to know. And this is where, so yeah, so again, is it fair? No, but it's just what it is. And same thing with family businesses, with founders syndromes, which is like, you have small companies, for example, the founder is like ego driven. It's all about their decision. They don't care about the decision of anybody else. They might even have really smart people working for them, but they don't take them at the end of the day, just their decision, because they have the founder syndrome, right? Like, I know it
Sure.
all. I'm gonna make the final call. And it's the same thing with these kind of companies you're talking about. And it's just what it is. And I wouldn't try to change it. I would just either accept it and play that game, or say that's not the game I want to play, and actually go for larger corporates where it's a little bit more standard process and there's, some laws and rules and regulations.
So if you were to let's take three scenarios where you have three different types of candidates. So you have somebody who is just a fresh graduate and wants to start their path, looking for their first job, or has had their first job, and maybe after a year or 2 years wants to, elevate themselves, go next. You have somebody like me who I would say is in the middle part of it, and I am trying to obviously, I mean, we've talked about this many times where I did freelance, but I'm at a point where I would like to get back into corporate for personal reasons, just a stability factor. And you have somebody who's probably at the twilight side of their career. So if you were to be advising them on what the do's and don'ts are for them to do at each of those stages, what would you say? Like top five do's, or top three do's, top three don'ts? What would you recommend?
Yeah, for the young people entering the market, don't overuse AI. This is what I run into. So I spend a lot of time at the university campuses, and I also interview a lot of. I source for like internship programs, and when I get on a call with these students or fresh grads, what happens is they've used AI in a way that they're prepared for the questions. But once I ask them a question that is like not AI,
Yeah.
created question, they're like, I don't know how to answer it. And also they give very generic AI answers. And it's okay, because
Yeah.
I get it, like, I get it, but also I just recommend to people, like, actually understand what you bring to the table. Be able to tell your
Sure.
story. That is where AI cannot do. When I work with my coaching clients now, for example, I tell them, I said, listen, go use AI for preparation for interviews, go use AI for X, Y, and Z, but do not use it to like tell your story. I said, this is where you and I can work together. And this is what I work with candidates, is that let's talk, let's pretend, let's do a mock interview, and you tell me your story. And this is where people get stuck. They're like, and that's because a lot of times they don't know that story. It's too much
Yeah.
information. They haven't practiced that story. So anyway, so that goes to all levels, but especially the younger ones, because I don't want you to BS me. Like, I can see through your answers. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think for the young people, just the most important thing is be willing to learn, be open to feedback, and just be excited to do the job. Like, that's the biggest thing, because
Yeah.
I talk to young people who are like just completely disconnected, didn't do their homework about the company, not sure what they bring to the table, not excited about it. I'm like, well, why am I going to give you an opportunity? There's 100 of you out there who are excited. Anyway, so that's the
Yeah.
young people, right? And then the older generation, so those that are kind of like, 50s, 60s, let's say, and then I'll come back to the middle. The 50, 60 generation, it becomes tough. And I literally just wrote about, because ageism is real, and I wrote an article
Yes.
about it, right? And honestly, I've never been in that space, so it's hard for me to even give like any functional advice. So it's just, the reality is that over there, it's all about the network. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. It's about your reputation. But the middle part, this is where you still have that chance, which is why, like, I always tell
Mhm.
people, like, and that's my area. Like, I work with people like up to senior kind of roles, right? Like, I don't work with older people a lot of times. And so what I say is, like, for people in their 30s and 40s, this is a chance to really make sure you develop a strong brand,
Mm.
reputation, right? And make sure that strategically the right people know what is it that you're good at and expanding, going beyond. And sometimes that means changing geography. Sometimes that means changing industry. Sometimes that means changing a lot of things. But sometimes it just means to be a little bit more, how to say, like intentional about the conversations that they're having, right? So because you don't want to end up in a position where in 50s and 60s you were like, people are judging you based on ageism, and again, depends on the role and so on, but in most cases, right? But you still have that 30s and 40s is still a very lucrative time to avoid being in that situation, right? So anyway, I'll pause here, but that's I mean, there's I can speak for hours on this middle part, so I'll pause here.
And what do you think about, traditionally, I think it also has a lot to do culturally. Like, traditionally, your parents would tell you, find a good job and work at it for like 30, 40 years because it's paying you well. As long as you have a paycheck coming in, as long as the company's good, as long as the company's secure and you grow within that company, why would you even think about moving? And then there's the other school of thought where, okay, you've worked at it, you've reached the ceiling, and then when opportunities present themselves, you shouldn't just let those go by because those opportunities could lead to more learning and more understanding and aspects of yourself professionally and personally that you might not have been able to achieve if you stayed in the same place. I've been very, very blessed in my career. I have worked for some of the best organizations across Dubai predominantly, but also to a certain extent in the UAE. Um, I have stayed the maximum within a role about 3.5 years. I never left a role because it was too challenging or too tough. It was because opportunities presented themselves, right? And at the beginning of my career, I was just so hungry to climb that corporate ladder. I just wanted more. This wasn't enough. If I learned this, I needed to learn more. So that's where that hunger came from. But then, it was just always I was blessed with different opportunities. Any position that I've been in, regardless of the duration, has always been an opportunity that presented itself. Maybe because at a certain role I had hit the ceiling, there was nowhere else to go after that, right? Maybe it was a financial gain, but most of the time it was something new. I took it because it was a challenge. I took it because it scared the crap out of me because I didn't feel like I was going to be able to do it. So I was like, no, then I got to do it because I'm afraid of it. So what is it? What would you say is everybody, again, different strokes for different folks, but what would you say based on your experience is, let's say, the right thing to do?
Well, first of all, there's no right thing to do, right? And you can do all the things right and still end up in a shitty situation. So, a couple of things. Number one, I think that there are people who build really successful careers in the corporate world, get their equity, and they just live off of that and retire early and live off of that equity for the rest of their lives, right? Depending on
Yeah.
where it is. I think that, like you said before, job security is not guaranteed. And I'm telling you that I'm speaking on this, and maybe people will relate, is that it's you can stay in a job, but know that it's can end at any moment. So you have to always financially prepare yourself. And I didn't do that earlier in my career at all. I'm like a late bloomer when it comes to that. But I think there's nothing wrong with building that up. I think in your case, so anyway, so financial security is one thing, but then sometimes you end up in a situation when you're like, even you have to get rid of your savings, and that's just messed up situation to be in. I think there are also cases where in your case in particular, knowing you, I think that you have to find somebody who's willing to give you a chance, not even who's willing to, let me back that up. Not who's willing to, who understands what you bring to the table, somebody who's willing to bring you on board and giving you the freedom and the kind of the freedom essentially to do what you need to get done, right? Because you're an executor, you're good at what you do, and for better or for worse, you're gonna run into companies where people are threatened by you, people who are interviewing you, right? Because you do bring a lot to the table.
All the time.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have a lot of experience, right? And not only is it on paper, but it's like real experience that you have, and you have the persona and the confidence and the whole thing. And that's threatening to a lot of people. So you have to, in your case, and also many other people's cases, you have to find a person who appreciates that, who needs a person like that on your team, on their team, right? And who's gonna give you that shot, who's not afraid of somebody who's strong and has that personality to come in and drive. So your case is a little bit unique because it's actually much easier to get a job if you're like a mediocre performer if your resume is just very mediocre and it's just, and if your personality is very like, I just want to execute and you're just a yes man, it's much easier because the people interviewing you wouldn't be threatened by you. And that's just the reality. Or you're not going to be a difficult candidate, right? Because that's another thing, right? Like that's the reality. People look at that. Is this person going to be pain in my ass? Is this
Mm.
person gonna be, is it gonna be enough? That's another big conversation. This is something that was said to me before. Is there like, I wouldn't know what to do with you. And I'm like, damn, like say it nice, like because I would be too much for that organization. And I'm like, thank you for
Yeah.
letting me know. And this is a VP of a large company told me that. And I said, I'm so sorry. You as a leader is so bad that you don't know what to do with a talent like mine. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's, and so
Yeah.
I think like, and so I think there are cases like that. And I think you're, for better for worse, you're in that situation where people might be threatened. And I mean, you're my friend and I feel threatened by you sometimes.
No, listen, it's look, it's the truth though. Like I remember sending my CV out, and
Yeah.
I remember one feedback I got was like, "Your CV is just too strong," and I was like,
Like, what kind of
"Thanks."
comment is that?
It's too strong. Okay, okay, and or when people kind of like when they meet me, I don't know, maybe it's because my face. It's I always make fun that I look like Sam the Eagle. I have a very, very, very stern, very, very serious face. Very much kind of like I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. But then when people get to meet me and they talk to me, they realize that actually I'm very different once you get to know me. And I think because I'm a no bullshit person, one thing I've found out in this journey of doing freelance operations and project management consulting is that people will hire you for your expertise because you have the expertise and because, pardon my French, you get the shit done. You get the job
Yep.
done. If there's an emergency, you're that emergency contact. This is actually what I was telling people. I don't know who I was talking to. I can't remember. I just recently said it. I said, put me as your emergency contact. I am the person that you should put as your emergency contact because when something happens, you would want somebody like me. But the problem is that they will
Yeah.
hire you, but then they will want to tell you what to do. And then it defeats the purpose. It's like, well, you hired me because I'm very strong and you want me to tell you what to do and for me to do things for you. But you have a hard time letting go of the reins because loss of control. And I get it. If you're somebody who's a very controlling person, if you're somebody who is not a very trusting person, if you're somebody who you've built something and you're afraid to hand it over to somebody else to carry on that legacy, I completely understand that. But micromanaging doesn't do anything for anybody, right? People need to understand that micromanagement is such a disservice to somebody who is a talent because there's a big difference between hiring someone and just filling a spot and bringing on board a
Wow.
talent. And I always, maybe it's me being arrogant, but I think I have accumulated enough wisdom, gone through enough growing pains to know that I am a talent. And whenever I interview with people, one thing that always kind of throws them off, I'm very honest. You know, I'm somebody who numbers has never been my forte, right? But it's like I don't know, I'm not very good at it, but I can learn. I didn't know anything about P&L until the last 3 years. It's something I really had to learn and develop. And I sat with a financial consultant while I was working on projects with, and God bless him, he put so much time and effort into helping me understand it. And now that I understand it, I'm like, okay, it's not rocket science, you know? And that's why there are people in finance positions. The thing is, we said this a couple of episodes ago that it's always more important to be a jack of a lot of trades than a master of one because it shows that you're adaptable, right? And
Uh-huh.
now with the influence that AI has in our lives, whether it's personal or professional, you might not know something, but AI can help you learn it faster, right? So there is a good and a bad to it. But I think when you're flexible and you're okay with being a jack of many things, then you actually, I feel, would add more value, right? Maybe I might not be a headhunter or a recruiter or an HR person, but I know how to spot people. You can put me in a room with somebody when I'm interviewing for a position, and let's say in the last since 2016, since 2019, it's been in the realm of healthcare and wellness. Put me in front of somebody, and within for the first 5 minutes, I will be able to know if this person will be able to work or will not be able to work. It's very, very simple. I can just read people very easily. And that comes with
Mhm.
years and years of dealing with people, you know? You get to see through
Yeah.
the bullshit. You get to see what people are trying to hide. Sometimes
Yeah.
people will show up looking like they're going to church on Sunday or they're going to the Kentucky Derby. They're dressed in their finest threads and they look perfect. But then you look at their resume, you're like, okay. But then when you start to communicate with them, you're like, this person would not know how to work under pressure. you know? So
Uh-huh.
those are things that
Yep.
you only get through like trial and error and learning people. And I think learning people and learning to work with people is so important when it comes to any type of position that you're in. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to adapt. And this is I think of this as one of the things that why I say I feel like I'm a talent. And if people are going to be like, man, she's full of herself, it's okay. I deserve this flower because so many times I've had to reinvent myself. You know, every time you start a new role and you go into a new organization, you have to not only learn that organization or that company, you have to learn the corporate culture and all of the active players within it, which means that you have to keep on learning. And the politics, corporate politics make you or break you. And I
Yep.
hate it. I
Mhm.
absolutely hate playing that political game. But at some point in time, you come to the realization that working in certain organizations or most organizations or just life, you have to wear lots of masks, especially on the work front. You can never be 100% yourself because it often will lead to envy and jealousy because people will get afraid that you're better than them and they'll try and undermine you to get you out the door because they'll just feel too threatened by your existence, you know? And that's unfortunately been something that I've had to experience. And I do have to say, again, I'm not trying to be sexist in any way, shape, or form, but I've experienced that with a lot of beta males who didn't know what to do with
Mhm.
having me around. And it was just like I was too much of an alpha for them, where it was, no, I'm just here to help you. But again, I was labeled as difficult. I used to take
Mm.
it very personally at first, but then I'm like, you know what? It's a compliment.
100%. And they need some testosterone, maybe injections. No, listen, it's I think we forget that when we step into an organization, we expect that the leadership, and I think this is what young people need to hear, maybe people who's only worked in like same organization, and the older I get, the more experience I have sitting in like leadership tables and even when leaders come to me for like coaching and stuff like that, I'm like, oh my God, like none of us do know what they're doing. Everybody, somebody who's in a leadership position, there's a small percentage of them that are actually really good and really smart at what they're doing. The rest of them just know how to play the game. That is it. They're
Yeah.
good at politics. They know how to play the game, and they stayed long enough not to get fired. That is it. They just play the game better than the rest of people because most people don't even want to play the game, and they're just horrible at it. So this is what I always say: like you have to make a decision when you go into an organization. If you know that leader, know that they hired you to make decisions, but then you realize that like they can't handle that. You know what I mean? Then you just play that game, to get paid until you get the hell out. The problem with that is that don't get sucked into that because that's what happens to a lot of people and then they turn into
Yeah.
those shitty leaders. And I get it. We all have bills to pay. So you got to play that game to whatever level you need to. Just don't let it eat at your soul. And that's why I always tell people have hobbies, have joy outside of work so it doesn't eat up your life. Right. But then the other piece of it is also like, so play the game. And the other one I wanted to mention, wait, gosh, no, it slipped my mind. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But it's at the end of the day, like you have to realize that you're just working with human beings who have egos, who don't have enough
For sure.
testosterone in some cases, right? Who the only control and power they have is over the people at work because they're so miserable in their home life and because their significant other treats them like shit and they're unhappy that they get to work and they unleash their power and control onto their poor employees. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's just the reality. Like once you start to recognize, you're like, what I'm saying? That's what it is. And that's what happens. You know what I'm saying? It's especially in leadership positions and sad to say because I was talking to a friend the other day and I was like, I'm so disheartened because when I was younger, I used to aspire to have a certain role and I used to aspire to be like a leader in an organization. And now when I see these leaders, I'm like, all of you are like jokes. All of you are like, you don't even deserve the like I really have no respect for titles anymore. You know what I mean? I lose respect for titles. I don't care how many years you've been at a big company name. I don't care what your title is. Are you a decent human being? You know what I mean? And a lot of them are just like politically really good at playing the game and they have no human pieces left in them and then they do this for the rest of the employees and they just they spill their shitty personalities onto us. And that's why you have to make a choice and just know that and just play that game if you have to until you don't have to play it no more. But
I
that's a sad reality, yeah.
I always look, I have had head roles, but I like to take it and maybe we can end off on this note. I always tell people I don't want to be the head of something. I'd rather be the neck of something, right? Because the head cannot do this without the neck, right? And I feel like if I am a solid neck, I'm the one who's steering and maneuvering everything anyway, right? So for me, it
Yeah.
hasn't always been important to be number one because number one needs a good number two to make sure that he or she can be number one. And I've
Yep.
always been comfortable being number two. And I think also back to what you're saying about the testosterone, you know what? I've had some really, really amazing male bosses. And to be quite honest, if you were to ask me if I were to prefer to have male or female bosses, I would say I'd rather have male bosses because I've also found that unfortunately women can get into their feelings a lot. And sometimes power can go to women's heads. And the whole concept of jealousy, if somebody is there, forget it if they're, forget the looks part of it, because that's another competition as well. But if somebody's
Mhm.
just a little bit better than you, unfortunately, women can get very, very catty. And then the way in which they start to maneuver and maybe play the political games in any type of organization tends to be really, really unhealthy. But all of this, having said all of this, it comes down to just wisdom and experience and working at it. I used to always believe that no, I need to wear my heart on my sleeve and I need to just be honest. And I'm not saying that you should be dishonest. You should always have the integrity of honesty and ethics. Ethics is really important. But I think to survive corporate life, at least, you gotta play the game. And playing the game doesn't mean that you need to not be lacking ethics. It just means that you have to learn how to maneuver and you have to learn how to strategize. And I think you have to learn how to be quiet and observe because a lot of times people will show you who they are.
Mhm. Amen to that. Text matters, but in this context, just don't be a shitty person. Like just don't be a
Yeah.
shitty leader. You know what I mean? But listen, I always say like fix yourself, like self improvements. You know what I mean? Because I don't know any happy, content, healthy person who has joy and love in their life and etc. But even if they have challenges and struggles, they're still deep down, they're just not a shitty person. Do you know that then spill that shit all over their employees and their coworkers. So I think just like work on yourself. That's my takeaway from this. You know what I mean? Whether you're a recruiter or a
Yeah.
leader, man, just work on yourself.
I'll end it on this note. I just recently, with a project that I just handed over, it was last year, I was working with a young boy, and he was a young boy because I had to literally spoon feed him. And he, God bless him, he got thrown into the deep end and he was helping me on the procurement side of the project. And when I was saying my goodbyes and doing my handover, he told me, he's like, I'm gonna miss you. I was like, well, I really appreciate it. He's like, you were very tough on me and you scolded me, but when you scolded me, you never disrespected me. And he's like, I learned so much from you. And it was like when you pushed me, it just made me want to work harder to kind of like, learn things more. And that made me feel so good for the fact that I don't believe in dehumanizing or belittling anybody. I find that you can be very stern and you can be very direct with people, but you don't need to treat them and make them feel inferior. You can still get your point across by doing it in a respectful way. And the fact that he said that he learned a lot from me, that was such a feather in my cap because like if somebody learned something from me, each one teach one, biggest compliment I got. And I think that's so important. I think people that you work with, whether they're on your level or whether you report to them or they're super high up in in when it comes to corporate setting, if you walk away from anything and you've either taught someone or you've learned something, I think that that's such a rewarding aspect of like your, corporate existence or your work, whatever your career is. Each one teach one.
There you go. Until next time.
Until next time.